How we do this, we are the truest. Got these fangs super sharp, your shit toothless. Cold-hearted, yeah we ruthless. All the ghouls in the cut, let's get ghoulish. In the graveyard, acting foolish. Finna dance with the devil to no music. Cold-hearted, yeah we ruthless. All the ghouls in the cut, let's get ghoulish.
Ghoulish Books presents Maggots Screaming by Max Booth III, narrated by John Wayne Comunale.
Part 5. Mummification. Looking back, I don't think the dad creature ever said a word to me while he was in our house. I suspect he didn't so much as glance at me, to tell you the truth. As far as he was concerned, I didn't exist. After the dad creature and Candy departed in the anthropologist's van, I wondered why they hadn't made me join them on their journey. Why they'd left me all alone in this house of death. I wasn't needed. I wasn't wanted. And neither were you. They left you in this house just as they left me. The whole reason they went to Corpus Christi is because my mother wasn't here to have the other head attached to her. But you and me, we were in the house the whole time, weren't we? They could have easily connected us if our dads had any interest in preserving his sons. But he didn't care. He only wanted his bride. He only wanted our mom. Which, if we're being honest, helped confirm my longest-held theory, and perhaps yours too, that without me getting in the way of things, maybe Mom and Dad would have never gotten divorced. There was a reason they didn't take us with them. We were a distraction. We were an infection. Without us around, the dad creature believed he had a chance of saving his marriage. And you know what? Maybe he wasn't wrong. I don't know how long I stood in the living room looking out the window after the van left. Andy's pickup was still in the driveway. So was my dad's. But what use were they to me? Even if I did know how to drive, I was missing my left arm. How much could I accomplish in my current state? On the road that ran in front of our house, cars passed from both directions, oblivious to the events that had transpired here over the weekend. If a single vehicle was aware of what had been going on in here, would they have stopped to lend a hand? I wondered what my own father or mother would have done if forced into such a situation. If they were told, "Hey, you know that house you're about to pass on your way to wherever you're going? Well, some truly heinous activity has taken place, and a little boy sure could use your help. 2 little boys, in fact. One of them can't move or talk, and the other one, he's missing his left arm. What are you going to do?" I knew what they would have done. They would have kept driving. They would have said this wasn't any of their business, and they would have been correct. All those cars that passed our house, it wasn't their responsibility to help us. They had their own lives to live. Who knew what kind of issues they were currently facing with their individual families? Everybody had baggage. Everybody had drama. Sometimes someone's problems were more severe than others, but that didn't make them any less unique, any less important. I was rotting away to a skeleton with my doppelganger, and my father had transformed into a 2-headed monster and was on his way to Corpus Christi with a kidnapped anthropologist assistant. In some other house, something similar or 100% worse could have been unfolding, and I had no way of knowing about it, just as they had no way of knowing about what was happening in our house. If someone did want to help, what realistically could they have done at this point? There was no reversing what had already occurred. My flesh wasn't going to grow back. I was dead. We were all dead, and there was no fixing that. This family, this household, we'd embarked on a downward spiral the moment we dug y'all up from the garden. There was no climbing back from something like this. So where did that leave me? It left me alone with you and Comrade. She was getting hungry again. I could tell by the way she kept nipping at my ankles as I wandered the house. I gave her another can of chili and a bowl of water, and that seemed to calm her down some. Piles of feces and puddles of urine were scattered throughout the kitchen and living room. We hadn't let her outside since Dad killed Andy. I didn't want her to have to see her owner in such a state. It didn't seem fair. She was just a dog. She wouldn't have understood why Dad had to do what he had to do. I hardly understood myself. I mean, deep down, I knew the truth. I knew that it wasn't something Dad had to do, not at all. He'd wanted to kill Andy, because even back then, he had something monstrous inside him. Long before Dr. Winsenreed surgically attached the other head to his spine, there had been a desire to kill, to destroy. And the first chance he was given, out in our yard when it was only him and Andy, he'd taken it, hadn't he? How many more people would he kill now that this transformation was complete? How many bodies would be eaten, ripped open, desecrated? What I couldn't understand, though, was that the transformation my father had gone through, I was experiencing the same buildup. Nobody had physically connected you and I, but still, if my dad had wanted to kill before the head attachment, then where was that desire in me? Why didn't I feel the same way? I didn't want anybody to die. I didn't want anybody to get hurt. I didn't want anything bad to happen to anyone. I just wanted everything to go back to normal, the way it had been before he'd shown up at Mom's door Friday morning, demanding his custody rights. But that was no longer an option, and it hadn't been for quite some time. So what did I do? What did we do? We turned on The Simpsons. Season 1, the beginning. The first episode to ever air, which was a Christmas special. When the family adopts Santa's little helper. Since our parents were no longer present, I sat on the couch next to you with Comrade curled up between us, chewing on your hand, your left one, which was the same hand she'd already taken from me. You didn't seem to mind. Even if you could have said anything, I don't think you would have complained. Sometimes it felt nice to be wanted, especially by a dog. And we would have probably stayed that way, plowing through another marathon of The Simpsons, Comrade subtly trying to consume both of our bodies, if the kitchen door leading back to the backyard hadn't swung open halfway through the Season 1 finale, followed by Comrade's former master. "Hey!" Andy said, upon noticing us in the living room. Comrade had already bolted off the couch and joined him in the doorway, where she was sniffing his legs. "Hey, I got a question for you." I couldn't tell if he was talking to me or you. The way he was looking at us, it could have been either one. Finally, I said, "Yes?" Am I dead?" he asked. And I nodded. "Yeah, I think so, yeah." And that's what I thought." It looked like he was wearing leather at first. Then I remembered the corpse Dr. Winsenreed had proudly demonstrated during the Body Farm tour. The one that had been left out in the sun, buried up to its stomach, exposed to the elements without any protection. That one also had been covered in leather. Or so it had appeared upon an initial glimpse. Of course, what we had seen at the farm had been the body's own skin, shrunken and dried out from the harsh, unrelenting Texas sun, which was exactly what had happened to Andy. Sprawled out in the unearthed garden grave, rotten under the sun, not a spot of shade in sight. "Holy shit!" Andy said from the bathroom down the hallway, inspecting himself in the front of the mirror above the sink. "Am I a goddamn mummy?" He walked out to the living room, Comrade close on his heels. I hadn't gotten off the couch. The thought of moving felt like entirely too much effort. "Holy shit!" Andy said again, gesturing at himself with both thumbs as if to say, "Would you get a load of this? Now I'm a goddamn mummy." "How do you feel?" I asked. Andy started to respond, then paused, further considering the question. "Dry. I feel incredibly, disgustingly dry." "Well, you are a mummy." "Holy shit!" Andy shook his head in shock, but also somehow amused by it all. "A goddamn mummy! Can you believe it? Me, a mummy!" He scooped up a mostly empty bottle of liquor Dr. Winsenreed had abandoned on the coffee table and took a long chug from the glass neck. The alcohol remained inside him for maybe 5 seconds before he spewed it all over the carpet. Comrade followed the mist and started licking it up, as if that had been the plan all along. He sat the bottle on the table and said, "Okay, that's out." He tried to snap his fingers, but they must have been too dry to produce sound. "Hey, I know. Y'all got any more of that embalming fluid shit left?" "No," I said. "We already drank all of that." "Damn! How did it taste, though?" "Not too bad, I guess." "Damn!" He glanced around the living room. "Well, what about those eye drops I got y'all from the drugstore?" "All gone." "All of them? Really?" "I'm sorry." "Ah, it's okay." He leaned forward, squinting his hollowed mummy eyes at me. "Hey, you know you're missing an arm?" "Yeah." "How'd you manage that one?" "Comrade ate it." "Bullshit." "It's true. My dog did not eat your arm." "Did too." Andy scratched Comrade behind their ears. "Did you eat Dylan's arm? Did you, you little lunatic?" Comrade let out an excited squeal as if to confirm, "Yes, I definitely did eat Dylan's arm, and it was delicious." Andy giggled and said, "Well, I apologize for that. I'll buy you a new arm if you want." "A new arm?" "Sure, why not?" "What kind of arm?" "Any arm you want." "Even a robot arm?" Whoa, calm down. How much do you think UPS pays me anyhow?" "You said any arm." "I said any human arm." "No, you didn't. You never said human." "I can't afford to buy you a robot arm," Andy said. "There's just no way." "That's okay. I guess I don't need a robot arm." "There, that's the spirit." He paused again, looking around for something he couldn't seem to locate. "Hey, I got another question for you." "What?" "Did your dad kill me?" "Yeah." He nodded. "I figured as much." "Are you mad at him?" "Well, I suppose I ain't too pleased if you want the truth." "What are you going to do to him?" "I don't know. For starters, I reckon a conversation is in order. Talk things out. See where we sit on everything. I mean, he killed me, and now I'm a mummy. These things don't happen every day, you know." "He isn't here." "Who isn't here? Your dad? Where the hell did he go?" "You missed a lot," I said, then tried my best to explain the events that had occurred following his murder. Afterward, he stumbled down the hallway and stuck his head in Dad's bedroom, checking I wasn't lying about the anthropologist's corpse. "Shit," he said, returning to the living room. "He really ate the hell out of her, didn't he?" "Yeah." "But Candy wasn't hurt. She was okay?" "She was scared." "But he didn't do anything to her?" I shook my head. "Man, they really sewed his head to his spine like that?" "Yeah." "That's pretty fucked up." "I know." "How come they didn't do the same to you?" "I don't know." "Probably child labor laws or some shit." "Yeah, I guess so." "Well," Andy adjusted the obey cap on his mummified skull, "I reckon there's only one thing we can do now, huh?" "What's that?" I was hoping he'd suggest another episode of The Simpsons. "We gotta head down to Corpus," he said instead, "and stop your old man from doing something truly stupid." Before we could leave, Andy said there was something we had to take care of first. Something we should have done a long time ago. He went out to his truck and came back with 2 red plastic canisters of gasoline. I tried to hold one of them, but the weight threw me off balance and I crashed to the floor. Comrade thought we were playing a game and tried leaping on me, but I was too afraid of getting gasoline on her, so I shoved her away with my elbow. It's not easy carrying a full can of gasoline with only one arm. I wouldn't recommend it. Andy didn't seem upset by my failure, though. He picked up both cans and started splashing gasoline all through the house. "If there's anything you're desperately wishing to save," he said, "I suggest retrieving it ASAP." I tried to think of a single possession I cared about enough to collect, but nothing sprung to mind. Maybe our collection of Simpsons DVDs, but those felt like too much work to gather. They'd serve their purpose. It was time to move on. But there was one thing we couldn't leave behind. I pointed at you and said, "He has to come too." "I don't know, Dylan. These bodies don't seem to be doing anybody any good. I think maybe we aren't burning him. But have you thought about—" I shook my head. "If he stays, I stay." "Okay," Andy said. "He can come." Together we wrapped you in a sheet and carried you out to his truck, hiding you in the uncovered bed with the rest of his odds and ends. What about the doctor? I asked. Nah, Andy said. Ain't enough of that crazy bitch left. Try salvaging. Are you really going to set the house on fire? You bet your ass I am, buddy. You ain't scared, are you? No, it's just, won't we get in trouble? Andy shook his head. You forget, I'm a mummy. You can't arrest mummies. It's unconstitutional. Won't Dad get mad, though? It's his house. Something tells me he doesn't have much use for it anymore. Okay, I said, suddenly excited to see some flames. Let's burn it. Comrade sat between us in the middle seat. You remained in the bed of the truck wrapped in a sheet. We drove away with smoke in our rearview windows. Only then did it occur to me to ask Andy how he was walking and talking if my father had murdered him. After all, there hadn't been any Andy doppelganger. There was just the one body. And he hadn't died during mysterious circumstances like the rest of us had. He'd been gutted with a hedge trimmer. It felt like a proper way for someone to die, unlike whatever had happened to me and Dad. With us, there had been no specific incident. No moment in time where we felt death overtake us. Suddenly, we were decomposing, a sensation so natural, it was almost as if we'd always been in such a morbid state and somehow hadn't noticed it until this weekend. But things were slightly different with Andy. There wasn't an additional body. Plus, he had actually been murdered. Now he was back from the dead. How? I asked again. How are you alive? Well, I don't think I'm alive, per se. Well, how are you a mummy? Figured that was obvious, Andy said. You got yourself a haunted backyard. What? Well, okay, the hole is haunted at least. Your mama's garden? Haunted as fuck, I'd say. It's haunted? I asked. By ghosts? Ghosts? What ghosts? I thought ghosts haunt things. Lots of things can haunt something. Andy raised the volume on his truck radio and increased his speed. Then a minute later, lowered the knob again. Okay, maybe cursed is a better word here. You got a cursed backyard, okay? How is it cursed? Well, okay, I don't know how, not exactly, but come on, look at the fucking evidence, right? Where did you guys find the other bodies? In that hole. What happened once you took them out? Both to them and you. Spooky shit, right? Now, what happened once your dad murdered me to death and left me to rot in the very same hole? I came back as a mummy. So, at this point, it feels pretty safe to conclude that the common denominator here is the hole itself. Maybe there's something weird in the soil, like some fucking redneck witchcraft bullshit. Or maybe there's some goddamn Indian burial ground somewhere in your yard. Or maybe 1,000 other things we could spend all day trying to figure out. Truth is, I don't think the reason matters at all much. Just accept the fact that you got yourself a haunted backyard and move on with your life. I thought you said it was cursed. Haunted, cursed, fuck's the difference? Is the fire gonna make it normal again? I asked, thinking how Andy tossed both canisters into the garden grave before leaving. The cans had been mostly empty at that point, but there was still a little liquid splashing around inside when they flew through the air. I kept envisioning the grave bursting into flames, like a pit leading directly into hell. I don't know if it was ever normal to begin with, Dylan. Will it still have its powers after we burned it up like that? Powers? Andy said, thinking it over. Boy, I sure as fuck hope not. Let me tell you this, okay? That hole? It ain't good news. The wrong kind of people learn about it, like, say, the United States government, for instance, and we're gonna have a whole lot worse to deal with than your goddamn dad running around with 2 heads making an ass out of himself. I'm talking fucking armies of ghouls. I mean, come on. Who knows what other kind of freaky monsters that hole can generate? Because that's what it is, right? A bona fide monster hole. You want to be the one responsible for the president genociding some Middle Eastern country with a legion of unstoppable mummies? Or what about little, I don't know, fucking gargoyles flying around your property, getting all up in your business? It's bad enough they listen through our cell phones. Now they want to send gargoyles to eavesdrop? I think not, friend. Oh, I said, wondering if Andy had forgotten my age during his mummification. How long does it take to get to Corpus Christi? About 2 hours and some change. Andy said. 3 if you drive like a pussy. He punctuated that last sentence by stomping on the gas and swerving around a line of slow cars in the left lane. I wonder what would happen if a cop pulled us over. Was it illegal to operate a moving vehicle while undead? I noticed no difference between Andy's driving as a mummy than when he'd been alive. What are we going to do when we get there? I asked. What do you think? Kill him? How can you kill what's already dead? Then what? Andy shrugged. Shit, Dylan, I don't know. We'll figure that out when we get there. You ever hear how your mom and dad met? Andy asked, shouting over the horrendous sound of his truck's muffler. No, I said. Alarmed, I'd never considered the concept of them not knowing each other. In my head, they'd always been together, until they weren't. But I'd never given much thought to how they got together in the first place. Did that make me a bad son? It's a pretty funny story, Andy said. It was the same night your dad got arrested. I'm surprised nobody's ever told you about it before. He was arrested? Yeah, but not like for anything bad. He was trying to impress your mom, and things got out of hand. What did he do? He stole Homer Simpson. What does that mean? Andy laughed. God damn, this would have been what, 10 years ago? Wait, how old are you? 13. God damn, time passes, huh? Even after you're dead. You might stop, but time does not. It just keeps going and going, and anyway, we would have been in our early 20s, at least old enough to buy booze, since the 3 of us were drunk as hell. The 3 of us being me, your dad, and Miguel. It was the premiere of the Simpsons movie. We smuggled in a couple 6-packs in this big trench coat your dad used to have. I remember the ticket lady giving us these ugly looks like she knew exactly what we were doing, considering it was the middle of summer in goddamn Texas. But she didn't say nothing. Didn't get paid enough to say nothing. Who really gives a shit if a couple fellas enjoy themselves while watching a movie, right? What does it matter? I didn't know you guys saw the Simpsons movie in theaters, I said, a little hurt that my dad had never mentioned this story to me during the numerous times we'd watched it on DVD together. Do you know who else saw the movie that day in the same theater? My mom. Bingo! They met while watching The Simpsons? Okay, now I was past merely feeling hurt. I was downright offended. If you believe in fate and all that bullshit, then I suppose you could call it fate. But yeah, her and a couple of her friends were sitting next to us in the theater. It's a miracle they didn't complain to a manager the amount of noise we were making. In retrospect, we were total assholes. I can't stand people who make noise while watching a movie. Yet, that's exactly what we were doing. Anyway, your mom, her and her friends noticed we had extra beers and asked if they could have some. We were more than happy to oblige. I hope you're not offended by me saying this, Dylan, but back then your mom was hot as fuck. I mean, to be fair, she still is. I probably shouldn't have said that to you. I apologize. It's okay. So, yeah, the group of us together, we get progressively drunker while watching the Simpsons movie. Then, when it's over, we stumble out into that slanted hallway you can never tell which way to exit from, and right outside our screening, there's this huge cutout of Homer fucking Simpson with a big old pink donut in his hand, like a promo thing. They wanted you to stick your head in the center of the donut and take a picture, which was weird. I don't think any of us had a smartphone at that point. Were people showing up to the theaters with actual cameras? Huh? He stole it? I asked. Look at you, getting ahead of the story. Yep, you're goddamn right he stole it. All it took was one innocent little comment from your mother. I believe it was something like, "It would be hilarious if someone stole this sign." Less than 5 seconds later, your dad had it over his head and was running full speed out of the theater. I don't know what his plan was exactly. Hell, come on. Let's be honest, okay? He didn't have a plan. He saw a beautiful pair of tits, again, I'm referring to your mother, and stopped thinking. Let that big dick of his plan out the rest of his actions, which evidently involved stealing a promotional cutout of Homer Simpson and fleeing teenage theater employees. Later, we all met up at the 7-Eleven, your mom and her friends included, because the store had temporarily redecorated itself as a quickie mart to tie in the movie coming out. They were selling shit from the show, like Squishies and Buzz Colas and all that other bullshit. "Twice the sugar, twice the caffeine," I shouted. "Tastes terrible, if I recall correctly," Andy said. "Anyway, we're all at the 7-Eleven, or the Quickie Mart, waiting to see if your dad's going to show or not. We'd already agreed to meet up there after the movie, but that was before he'd spontaneously decided to commit a crime. I knew he'd come, though, especially since your mom already told us at the theater that she was interested in checking out the store with us. And lo and behold, there he was, emerging from the night like a ghost, holding that goddamn Homer Simpson over his head. We all stood out in the parking lot and cheered and made him feel like the coolest guy in the world, which probably lasted all of 5 minutes before a cop pulled up and asked where he got the sign. But by then, it was too late. Your mom and dad were helplessly in love. Not even a night in jail and 8 weeks of community service would separate them." "Was he able to keep the sign?" "The Homer Simpson?" "Yeah." "Hell no! That shit was filed away into evidence. Probably there to this day, rotting away to nothing." "Just like us," I said. "Just like us," Andy said, smiling. We had to stop for gas in Choke Canyon, about an hour outside Corpus Christi. "It's a good thing I have my card," Andy said as he got out of the truck. "Can you imagine me going inside looking the way I do?" He didn't need to tell me not to leave the truck. I already knew things wouldn't go well if people laid eyes upon me in my current state. It wasn't every day someone saw a skeleton boy with one arm, especially in the summer, when we were months away from Halloween. He swiped his card and leaned forward, inspecting the dim screen, then said, "You gotta be shitting me." "What's wrong?" I asked from the passenger seat. He'd been kind enough to leave the windows rolled down. "Says something went wrong. I gotta see the cashier." "What are you gonna do?" "Well," he glanced around the empty parking lot, "I guess I'm gonna go see the cashier. Shit, I shouldn't have used up all the gas from the cans." He left me alone in the truck with Comrade and entered the gas station. I leaned forward over the dash, watching him interact with the cashier, waiting for something terrible to happen. I half expected her to take one look at him and pull out a gun from behind the counter, but she didn't seem to really notice him. Andy returned to the truck and started pumping gas. I stuck my head out the window and asked him what she'd said. "Nothing really. The card reader isn't working out here, so they're having everybody come in to pay." "But she didn't say anything about how you look?" He shook his head as the gas pump spurted out its last drops. "Nah, she didn't say shit." We got back on I-37, and Andy cranked up his music, Black Sabbath, the same album my dad liked to play. There was a reason the two of them were friends. It saddened me they'd spent so long not talking because of Miguel and my mom. That the only reason they'd reconnected was because of the mystery in our yard. A mystery that would lead to my father murdering someone who had once been one of his best friends. There was nothing good about the garden grave. Not even you, I'm sorry to say. Everything that preceded our discovery had progressively made everybody's lives worse. There would be no happy outcome for any of us. That much had been clear for a while. Where we were headed, it wouldn't end with a Disney logo. The three of you guys ruined everything. I hate to say it, but it's true. I don't blame you, personally, but you have to take some kind of responsibility. You probably didn't mean to cause the damage you caused, but nevertheless, here we are. I was honored to have helped Andy set it all on fire. I couldn't stop thinking about the gas station cashier, the way she'd allowed Andy to purchase fuel without freaking out, despite him clearly being a mummy. What did that mean for our future? If he could pass as a non-monster, what about me? What would have happened if I'd have gone into the gas station too, looking the way I did? I kept envisioning the three of us, Andy, Comrade, and I, panhandling on the streets. The only thing sadder than a homeless kid with one arm was a homeless kid with one arm who also had a dog. Living on the streets felt like the only logical fate. I wasn't returning to school in my current state. Andy wasn't going back to UPS. Mummies couldn't deliver packages. There was no way that'd be allowed. He'd lose his home, which would leave us both without a residence. I didn't see a reality with Dad in my life, not after the transformation. He was something else now, something we couldn't tame. And Mom? Maybe she'd be okay. Maybe we would save her and she'd join us in our life on the streets as literal monsters begging for spare change. But that didn't feel right. Something deep in my rotten gut told me we were far too late. A feeling that would only be confirmed upon spotting the police cars and ambulances surrounding the Corpus Christi Medical Center. The streets in front of the hospital was blocked by police barricades. A terrified-looking cop waved us to turn around. Andy ignored the warning and pulled up as far as he could get before the cop furiously blew a whistle at him and stomped toward the truck. Andy rolled down his window and said, "What's going on? Something happened at the—"
"Get the fuck out of here," the cop screamed. "It's not safe. Turn around immediately."
"Wait a second," Andy said. "I think I can—"
"Gah!"
The cop backed away from the truck, having finally taken a good look at the person behind the wheel.
"What happened to you?"
All the color drained from his face and his lips started quivering.
Are you another... Holy shit, are you one of them?"
"One of what?" Andy said, although it was obvious what the cop had meant. One of those monsters, because the dad creature had been here, maybe still was here, and the cop had encountered him. He'd seen what the thing was capable of doing, and he wanted no part of it, which was why he was out here redirecting traffic instead of joining the other cops behind him in the parking lot, who were slowly approaching the front doors with their guns drawn. "It's okay," I said, and the cop gasped. He hadn't noticed me sitting in the passenger seat, but now he did, and judging by the face he made, he did not care one bit for the way I looked.
"Jesus Christ!"
He took out his gun and pointed it at the truck.
"How many of you freaks are there?"
"Would you just fucking relax?" Andy said. "You're making my dog nervous." As if on cue, Comrade let out a bark, prompting the cop to scream and squeeze the trigger, shooting Andy directly in the face. The back of his skull cracked open and bits of brain matter splattered against me. Suddenly, I couldn't stop thinking about the cop who'd shot the squirrel at my friend's birthday party. Everything repeated itself sooner or later. It was unavoidable. Comrade's barking pumped up to a full freak-out mode.
"Now what the hell'd you do that for?"
Andy asked, touching the new hole in his face. "I was really fucking rude. You know that?" The cop yelled something unintelligible, dropped his gun, and took off, running away from the hospital. I tried restraining Comrade by gripping her collar, but she wrestled out of my grip and leapt through the window and started chasing him down the street. "Are you okay?" I asked.
"I mean, yeah, all things considered," Andy said. "I feel fine."
"Why did he shoot you?"
"Because that's what cops do."
"Are they going to shoot us too?" I asked, referring to the group of policemen in the parking lot. Instead of approaching the hospital, they were all turned toward us, weapons raised. We were somehow perceived as a bigger threat than whenever was in the hospital. They were yelling something, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. Something about surrendering.
"Shit, what do you think?"
Andy said. "What are we going to do?"
"Well, the way I see it, we came here with a job to do."
"Get my dad?"
"Get your dad."
"But how?"
"I reckon same as everyone else. The front doors. But now might be a good time to buckle up, by the way."
"What about Comrade?" I asked. Somewhere in the distance, the cop who had shot Andy let out a painful squeal. Andy laughed.
"She seems to be handling herself just fine."
And with that, he cranked his music back up and slammed on the gas. The truck shot forward and bounced over the grassy median into the parking lot. I tried to buckle my seatbelt, but it turns out buckling a seatbelt while sitting in the passenger seat is extremely difficult when you're missing a left arm. I gave it 3 attempts before giving up and letting the seatbelt fling behind me. What did I need a seatbelt for anyway? I was already dead, right? The cops pointed their guns at us and fired a few shots before realizing Andy had no intention of slowing down or swerving out of the way. They flung themselves to either side of the parking lot as we barreled through. At one point, I'm positive I heard Andy shout, "Yee-haw!" The automatic front doors managed to separate maybe an inch before we smashed into the glass and slowed down to a stop in the middle of the lobby. Outside, cops continued to yell orders at us, and we continued to ignore them. "God damn," Andy said, punching the ceiling of his truck. "Now that was fun, wasn't it?" I was unable to join in on his excitement. My attention had redirected to the numerous mauled corpses scattered throughout the waiting room. On the chairs, on the floor, ripped in half, disemboweled, chewed up. Despite spending the weekend living in a house of death, nothing could have prepared me for the grisly scene awaiting us at the hospital. Not all of them were dead. Some were crawling around the lobby, entrails hanging out from their severed waists, pleading for help. I'm sure they wished they were dead. I sure as heck was grateful to no longer be alive. "Holy shit," Andy said, embracing reality. "You think your old man did all this?" "Yeah," I said. There was no doubt about it. "He did it." "Well, where the hell did he go then?" I pointed ahead where a trail of gore led toward an entryway marked stairs. "We follow the blood." Andy drove his truck around the corpses and backed up against the stairs. This way, he told us, none of those dickhead cops could follow. Personally, I didn't see how that would stop them. They could have easily climbed through the interior of the truck like we did to get to the other side. But at that point, I didn't care enough to point out the flaws in his logic. If they followed us, then they followed us. I only wanted to find my dad, and my mom, if she was still here. I couldn't let him turn her into what he'd become. It didn't matter if I failed at everything else in my life, as long as I succeeded at this one thing. If I could save my mom, I would be okay. Well, not okay, but okay enough. I'm sorry we left you in the bed of the truck, wrapped in that sheet, but surely you can understand the situation we found ourselves in. There had simply been no time to figure out a logical method of transporting your body upstairs with us. Besides, you were fine waiting downstairs. Nobody was going to notice you with everything else going on. The blood trail stretched to the top floor of the hospital and out the door. More corpses awaited us in the hallway, people moaning and releasing their final breaths. The walls were spattered with human innards. Some of the bodies I noticed were different compared to the ones in the lobby. A lot of them wore black suits and sunglasses. Firearms were scattered around them. Men in Black, X-Files, those kind of guys. Secret agents, FBI, something to do with the government. But why so many? And why on this floor specifically? Because of my mom. They were protecting her, or maybe guarding was the more appropriate word. They knew something was unusual about her illness. Something nobody had ever witnessed before, and they didn't want anybody else knowing about it. We followed the trail of death until it stopped at a door marked Private, Level Red Clearance Required for Entry. The keycard lock was smashed in at the knob. Someone else had already done the hard work for us. Andy pushed the door open without exercising too much energy. I didn't know what I expected us to find in the room, but I somehow wasn't surprised by what was there, and neither was Andy. Maybe we'd known the whole time. There, directly across from the doorway, was my mother, sitting up in a gurney, naked. No sheet covering her body. But that was okay. She wasn't naked like an alive person because she was no longer alive. By that point, most of her flesh had deteriorated. Her hair remained in small patches of blackened skin. Still, she was a skeleton, just as I was a skeleton. Yet, we both possessed fully functioning eyeballs and tongues and the ability to move and make noise. None of this seemed strange. It felt perfectly, beautifully natural. On one side of the gurney stood Candy, and a man I'd never seen before, but judging by his attire, he was a doctor of some sort. A surgeon would have made the most sense. They both stared at my mom like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Neither of them had noticed our arrival. On the opposite end of the gurney was something else. The thing we'd driven here to stop. My dad. What used to be my dad. What my dad was now. Our dad. The two-headed creature who had brutally slaughtered countless people throughout the Corpus Christi Medical Center. He was on all fours like an animal, focused solely on my mother. Both of his heads were weeping. Black sludge streamed from his various tear ducts. "And what the fuck is going on here?" Andy asked. Candy and the surgeon jumped, startled by Andy's voice. Mom didn't react. Neither did the dad creature. "Andy?" Candy said. Is that you?" "Of course it's me. Hell else you think it is?" She rushed toward him, body trembling. "But you're
A mummy? You bet your ass, baby."
He wrapped his arms around her and squeezed tightly. I stepped past them and observed the hospital room closer, only then realizing what we'd previously missed. On the floor, next to the gurney's wheels, there was another body, a skeletal woman in a dirty wedding dress. There was nothing between her shoulders, just a rotted stump where her head used to be. "Oh no," I whispered, rushing to the gurney. "Mom?" Then I stopped, at a loss for words, seeing why my mom was sitting up so awkwardly like that. She couldn't lay down, at least not on her back, not with the head of her doppelganger surgically attached to her spine. We were too late. We were too late. The second head was attached, and her eyes were open. Black saliva trickled out of her mouth, hungry, confused, psychotic. The wedding veil hung over her face. I spun around and glared at the surgeon with murder in my eyes.
"What did you do?" I asked. "What did you do?"
I'm sorry." He backed away from the gurney, stammering. The man was drenched in sweat. They didn't give me, I can't, how is this possible? How is this, oh my God, how is this?
"We're beyond asking that question," Andy shouted from across the room. "It gets us nowhere."
The surgeon turned toward the sound of his voice and gasped. You're a...
"Yes, a mummy. We've established that as well."
"Oh my God."
"It's fine. Relax."
The surgeon exhaled deeply and sat down on a stool. He was drenched in sweat and looked like he was on the verge of a heart attack. The man had performed his duty here already. We'd failed to stop him in time. It wasn't like he could reverse it now, or maybe he could. But who was going to ask him to do that? The dad creature wept beside the gurney. Crying, yes, but not from sadness. These were tears of happiness. The thing was overjoyed that the surgery had worked, that Candy and the Corpus Christi surgeon had successfully attached the doppelganger's head to my mother's spine.
"Our bride," the dads moaned. Join us, please."
My mother's head grunted something unintelligible. Then she repositioned herself on the gurney so she was standing on her knees and palms. The second head had taken control of her body, just as the transformation had unfolded with my father. Somewhere behind us, the surgeon quietly said a prayer. She glanced around the hospital room, studying each of us with a newborn's curiosity, until finally giving the dad creature her full attention.
"Our bride," he said again. "We love you."
And the head atop my mother laughed and said,
"But we don't love you."
Even the dad creature was struck silent by the response.
"Why are you here?" the mom creature asked. "We don't need you. We don't want you. We told you. We...
It was the first time I'd seen him afraid since the transformation.
"We love you. We are meant to be together."
Mom's top head shook back and forth, still amused by what she was hearing.
"We are nothing." "Nothing?" the dad said.
"Oh, shit," Andy whispered, grabbing my shirt collar and pulling me back with him and Candy. "This don't look promising." "What are they gonna do?" Candy asked. But I already knew the answer. It was what they'd been doing for years. It was what they did best. They were going to fight. The mom creature made the first move. Like a spider, she leapt off the gurney and tackled the dads against the wall. Both bottom heads started nipping at each other. The top heads growled and screamed and thrust forward with violent strikes. They were like two wild dogs fighting to the death. The surgeon never stood a chance. He was still on the stool when their bodies rolled in his direction, sucked him up like dust in a tornado. Within seconds, every ounce of blood stored inside him had been splattered against the wall. Their chaos quickly spread across the room and knocked us to the ground. I fell into a wooden chair. Andy wasn't so lucky. Practically made a dent into the wall. They hit him so hard. It was amazing he didn't explode like the surgeon. Maybe mummies can explode. I never read much about mummies before. It could have been one of their hidden talents. Candy was smart enough to flee the room before they got close enough to cause any damage. As the only one of us still alive, I couldn't blame her for thinking of herself in that instance. The dad and mom creatures rolled through the doorway and into the hallway, leading into the main waiting room for the top floor. They were a ball of gooey energy, gathering more heat with every outburst. Andy and I followed behind but kept our distance, wary of falling into the line of fire again. The two-headed parents threw each other against waiting room chairs and overfilled trash cans. They snapped their jaws and tried to rip their throats out. They tripped over the corpses the dad creature had already created upon his arrival, succeeding in spreading more gore throughout the hospital. They were destroying everything that came in contact with them, all while screaming things like, "We hate you," and "We love you." Candy caught up with us, out of breath. "What are they doing?" "They're gonna fucking kill each other," Andy said. "What do we do?" I asked. "What do we do?" He shrugged like I was overreacting, like it wasn't such a big deal. "Let 'em." "We have to help," I said. "We have to." "And how the hell exactly do you reckon we do that?" But of course I didn't know. How could I? It wasn't like I'd ever been in this situation before. They fought before, sure, but things had never gotten physical, and they'd never fought as two-headed monsters. This was definitely a first. Not just for myself, but possibly for any other kid on the planet cursed with a dysfunctional family. I'd gone so long without seeing my mom. I missed her so badly, and here she was, too busy to even glance at me, too caught up with how much she despised my father. And the same thing went for Dad. He hadn't noticed we followed him to the hospital. All he cared about was my mother loving him again, when it was obvious she never would. Not even in death. Their marriage was over. Forever. They should have saved everyone the trouble and avoided getting married in the first place. The whole relationship had been a waste of time for everybody. I thought about how they met at the Simpsons movie and wished they'd never gone to the same screening. That they'd married other people and had other children. That they'd done the whole world a favor and lived different lives. Then maybe everybody in this hospital would still be alive, and Andy wouldn't be a mummy, and the garden grave would have never been discovered. So many different realities that we'd never know because both of them just had to go see the Simpsons movie at the same time in the same place and wreck everything. For the first time in my life, I find myself hating the Simpsons. I would have rather watched The Office. "Wait," I said, an insane idea suddenly forming. I turned toward Andy and Candy. We had to shout over the sounds of my parents killing each other. "I know what to do! I know how to fix this!" Andy chuckled. "Oh yeah? What you thinking? Couples therapy?" "How do you use the intercom?" I gestured to the speakers hanging from every corner in the room. "I want to play something." "Do you think I work at this hospital? I don't fucking know how to use that." "Over here!" Candy shouted, excited. She motioned us over to a series of computers hidden in the nurse's station. There was a microphone marked intercom on the desk. "Okay, you found that a little too easily," Andy said. "I'm excellent at scavenger hunts," Candy said. "I don't know what the hell good an intercom is gonna do. It's not like they're listening to a goddamn word we have to say." "We aren't gonna say anything," I said, and nudged him aside with my shoulder. I sat at the desk and clicked the closest computer out of sleep mode. A password prompt generated across the screen. The three of us stared at it for nearly a full minute while my mother and father continued wreaking havoc on the other side of the room. "Try hospital," Andy suggested. I typed hospital, one-handed, and clicked submit. The monitor blinked to life. Holy shit, Andy said. I can't believe that worked. Now who's finding things too easily? Candy asked. Oh, maybe we should try a scavenger hunt together sometime. A sex scavenger hunt. Wait, she said. What does that mean? I don't know. I imagine there's whipped cream involved, though. We'll figure it out later, after we're done with this bullshit. I tried to ignore what they were discussing and focused on the computer in front of me. It took less than 10 seconds to bring up YouTube, then another 20 seconds, mostly thanks to my lack of a second hand, to search for Simpsons theme song on loop. The first result was exactly what I was after. A video titled The Simpsons, 10 Hours Intro. I clicked play and blared the volume, then grabbed the microphone and enabled the intercom button, holding the mic up against the computer speakers. The theme song for The Simpsons suddenly exploded through the hospital, drowning out all other noise. The dad and mom creatures stopped fighting and froze in mid-attack upon the arrival of the music. It was like magic almost, how quickly the theme song affected them. What the hell? Andy said. There's no way this is gonna work, right? Something's different about them, Candy said. Can't you tell? The fucking Simpsons? I swear to God. I abandoned Andy and Candy at the nurse's station and cautiously maneuvered across the room, around the corpses, around the gore, toward my parents, or what was left of my parents. They were standing on all fours next to a huge window overlooking the hospital parking lot. The way their bodies were wrapped around each other, a stranger might have mistaken their embrace for a hug or some other act of love and devotion. The theme song erupted through the intercom speakers at a deafening volume. I had applied a piece of tape to the microphone button to prevent it from shutting off. It would continue for the next 10 hours if nobody tampered with it. Mom, I said. Dad? Either they couldn't hear me over the Simpsons theme song, or they both chose to ignore me. Regardless, neither acknowledged my presence. As I neared, I noticed both of them were crying that bizarre black sludge again. The tears slowly dripped down their skeletal cheeks. Each head maintained eye contact with the other. They were sharing something together, but I couldn't tell what. Communicating through telepathy. The music had triggered something undeniable in them. The memory of how they met, perhaps so many years ago at the premiere of the Simpsons movie. Did it remind them that they hadn't always hated each other? Did it remind them that they once indeed loved each other? Mom, I said again. Dad? And this time both of them turned toward me. All four heads, finally, truly looking at me. Black tears down their faces, mouths curling into sad smiles. They had heard me. They were listening. It's going to be okay, I told them, because it sounded like something I would have wanted to tell them. And Dad shook his bottom head and said, No, it's not. And Mom shook her bottom head and said, Not okay. Never okay. But I'm here, I said. I'm here to save you. You cannot save us, both the moms and dads said in unison. What are you talking about? We aren't. They paused, all four heads now speaking as one. We cannot be saved, and neither can you. What are you? Mistake! Error! Never again! Never again! We can hide, I told them. We can go somewhere. People can help us. No more help. But Mom, Dad, come on. We belong dead, my parents said. And before I could comprehend what they were doing, the two of them, still looped in their bizarre, slimy embrace, lunged toward the window, shattering through the glass and disappearing from view. I ran toward the opening and looked down at the parking lot below. They must have exploded upon impact. Body parts were scattered all over the cement, none of them moving. The cops rushed toward the mess with their guns drawn, prepared to plug holes in anything that had tried lashing out at him. But they didn't need to worry. My parents weren't going to get up again. Not then. Not ever. "I think that's our cue to get out of here," Andy shouted behind me. I could barely hear him over the sound of the Simpsons theme song kicking back up through the intercom speakers. I understood enough of what he was saying, though, and couldn't have agreed more. The three of us hurried down the stairs, careful not to slip on the trail of gore my parents had spread during their final argument. Nobody had touched Andy's truck. Anyone who was still alive must have been too preoccupied trying to make sense of the monster suicide out in the parking lot. I climbed in the bed next to you, and Candy slid into the passenger seat beside Andy, and he reversed out of the lobby and gunned it through the vandalized hospital entrance. We made it halfway through the parking lot before Andy slammed on the brakes. I flew against the back window of the truck and would have probably experienced a considerable amount of pain if that were something I could still experience. Instead, I felt mostly annoyed. I stood up in the bed and surveyed the scene. Comrade stood in front of the truck, blood dripping from her jaws, but she didn't appear injured. The blood wasn't hers. It was cop blood. But she wasn't alone. Standing next to her was Miguel holding an iced coffee and a paper bag from Dunkin' Donuts. "Andy?" he said, head cocked. Andy got out of the truck and approached them. I remained in the bed where it felt safer. I wanted nothing to do with Miguel in that moment and any other. He had failed to protect my mother. "Howdy, Miguel," Andy said, grabbing Comrade's collar and guiding her to the truck. What's going on? Are you okay? What's going on with all these cops? Is that Dylan in your truck? Dylan, is that you? What is happening?" I ducked behind the truck window. Nothing I could say to him would make a lick of sense, so I didn't bother trying. Andy, on the other hand, was more sympathetic. "Where have you been?" Miguel held up the bag and iced coffee. I went to get some lunch." "Well, partner, you sure missed a hell of a lot." "What the hell is this?" "Max and Lori are back together," he said, picking up Comrade and sliding her into the truck next to Candy. "And I'm a goddamn mummy." "You're what?" "A mummy, Miguel," Andy shouted. "I'm a goddamn mummy." He got in the truck and slammed the door. We drove away without answering any more of his questions, leaving him alone in the middle of the parking lot with his iced coffee. He and I briefly shared eye contact as the truck sped down the road. He lifted his hand and waved the Dunkin' Donuts bag at me. Either he was telling me goodbye, or he was offering me a donut. I lifted my remaining hand and waved back at him. I didn't want a donut anyway. I wasn't sure where Andy was taking us until I saw the bridge sign for Purgatory Creek. We were returning to the body farm. It made sense in a weird way. Where else could we have gone? Dad's house was burned to the ground. The Corpus Christi Medical Center surely had my mother's address in their records. Her house was probably swarming with government agents by then. Plus, everybody had seen Andy's truck. At least one person must have written down his license plate, and if not, one of the numerous cameras on the premises would have recorded it. So that ruled out his place. Meaning we were running dry on options, except the body farm. We wouldn't have to worry about Dr. Winsenreed since my father had fortunately eaten her face. The only employee there would be Candy. It was the perfect hideout. I didn't know how long we'd be able to stay there until someone noticed the anthropologist was no longer reporting to work. Would they promote Candy as the head of the facility, or bring someone else in for the job? That was a problem for the future. We'd dealt with enough trauma for 1 week. We were owed a break. And a break was what we were going to take. We turned right at the Jesus Rock and continued down the long, narrow dirt road until coming upon the archway marked Henenlotter Ranch. Andy stuck his arm through the window and punched in a series of numbers. The gates swung open, inviting us inside. A heavy sense of relief hit me as the gates closed behind us, like we were returning home from a long, stressful vacation. The first night on the farm, you stayed in the bed of Andy's truck, and I roamed the property with Comrade, checking out the various corpses displayed among the land. Andy and Candy disappeared inside the office, and I didn't see them again until the next day. I can take a guess at what they were doing. I don't know how, considering Andy's new lifestyle as a mummy, but I didn't particularly want to put too much thought into it. We spent the next day together, the three of us, playing games on the farm, driving the golf cart around, having fun for once. It had been a while. I missed being a kid. I'm not sure exactly how much time passed before Andy approached me with Candy's idea. I do know it was Andy who talked to me about it. Candy didn't have the courage to bring it up herself. I wasn't against the idea, not entirely. I'm not an idiot. My decomposition hadn't magically stopped. Things are progressing, albeit slowly. They will get worse. Someday soon, I'll be less than a skeleton. I will be nothing. The earth will consume me. And the same goes for you. If we are going to act, then we need to make a decision soon, which is why we're here now, at my request. Sprawled out together in the middle of the body farm, protected from vultures by one of those metal cages. Just you and me, alone. Except for Comrade, who keeps circling our cage, whining, eager to continue eating us. I told Andy to give us a couple of days to think about it. He was more than happy to oblige. It only meant more time he could spend with Candy. More time to do the things I don't want to picture. Sometimes even the dead can be grossed out. So, here we are. I've told you the story of how we found you, or how you found us. I've told you everything I know. You and I were equal. There is nothing between us. And now we have a tough choice, because Andy wasn't exaggerating. We aren't looking too pretty. I don't know how much longer we'll last. There is going to come a point where we are dead, or at least unable to move, unable to talk, unable to do anything but think. Is that what happened to Dad and Mom? All those pieces scattered throughout the parking lot? Did they remain sentient through it all? Are they somewhere this very second, wondering where I am? Where we are? Okay, we have two options here, the way I see it. Option one, we do nothing. We stay in this cage and we let nature continue its course. We do what we do best and we rot until there's nothing left to rot. Or, option two, and that's where things get tricky, right? Candy thinks she can do it. She's witnessed the surgery twice now, and the second time she'd practically walked the surgeon through it. Told him exactly what to do. She seems confident about her abilities. Less confident about what the outcome might end up being. We saw what happened to our parents. Is that the life we want? Of course, there's no way to know the same thing will happen to us. Maybe she attaches you to me and everything works out fine. We live forever, the two of us, best friends for life, assuming the transformation halts the decomposition, like we suspect. Plus, you'd finally be able to talk. I could be the one listening for a change. That sounds pleasant, doesn't it? I wouldn't mind something like that. Unless things go dark. Unless we get hungry like our father got hungry. I don't want to kill anyone. I don't want to be responsible for that kind of violence. I don't want to be a monster. But the thing that scares me the most, I can't say for certain whether or not you agree. You've laid here this whole time, listening to our story, not saying a word. But I know, based from experience with the other bodies, you can understand me. You know what I'm saying. But I don't know what you're thinking. And I don't know if I can let Candy complete our transformation without being 100% sure that things aren't going to get worse. So unless you can tell me right here, right now, that you want to try to make things work, that you want to have a good life together, then I'm afraid you already know what my answer will be once Andy returns to our cage tomorrow. Because, truth be told, lately all I can think about is what our parents told us before leaping out that hospital window. Nothing in this world feels truer than those final words. Nothing makes more sense. Do you remember what they said? Of course you do. You remember it because I remember it. They said, We belong dead.
This has been Maggots Screaming by Max Booth III, brought to you by Ghoulish Books, narrated by John Wayne Comunale.
Live spooky, die spooky.
Rest in peace, Max